Control Resonant finally has a release date. Now, I've been wanting to make this video for a while, and the new trailer dropping gave me the perfect opportunity to do so. So this is going to be another more of an unscripted video. I just want to talk about how hyped I am for this game and all the big loose ends that it can draw from, and what the trailers have left clue-wise for us to pick up. So without further ado, let's get weird. Now, if you don't know what the heck I'm talking about when I say Chester Bless or the Blessed Organization, I don't blame you. He was pretty much only referred to in little bits of lore documents in the original Control and Alan Wake 2. But once you realize what his whole deal is, it's very interesting and can even tie back into Quantum Break. Now, a big thing that we learned from a lot of these lore documents in Control is that there is a shadowy kind of black market about altered items and sometimes even interfering in altered world events. One of the big figures in this industry we know is a man named Chester Bless, who runs something the FBC has termed the Blessed Organization. They show up numerous times in relation to certain altered items, usually that, like, oh, there's a guy named Chester Bless who was involved in this, or there was blessed video creation. It's like, oh, that's a little weird. That's happened 3 times now. And then the FBC starts to go, huh, and they put some tabs out on this guy, Chester Bless. Soon after that, there was this episode of American Overnight, which is the FBC's little radio show that they use to collect information. And they got sent a fondue set that turned one of their people to ash. And it was just sent by Chester Bless, or I believe it was sent, it was like, I hope you have a blessed day in the note. And so they went, oh shit. So we know after that, that Chester Bless and just the Blessed Organization in general has been very big in the underground community for altered items. And their name has even popped up as far as Alan Wake 2. Some of the boxes in Alan and Alice's apartment near the end of the game are referred to as like Blessed Moving Corporation or something like that. And then even when you get to the emails with Barry, he says that he's gone on a wellness retreat in LA, I believe. And he says that he's met this guy Chester at the Blessed Wellness Retreat, who said, yeah, you're going to be glad you got out of New York, which kind of leads us to our next big thing. Did Chester have something to do with the events of the game now? Now, we know now, based on a line that Emily gives us in the trailer, that 2 days before the lockdown lifted, quote unquote, we don't quite know exactly how that happened, there was a significant resonance outside of the oldest house. So whatever started this whole event that's happening in the game did not quite originate in the FBC. That leads us to then again Chester saying, hey, don't go to New York, and also just being like, well, if the shoe fits. Of course, then that also begs the question, will we see Barry again? It's been a question that people have fielding since Alan Wake 2. Even in Alan Wake 2, I believe during the end, someone was like, why not all the love for Barry? Do they have further plans for this character in a little tongue-in-cheek kind of way? So I'm expecting that we will possibly see Barry in this if Chester is considered to be the quote-unquote big villain of this game. If not, then maybe we'll see him in a future game. But I think Barry is definitely tied to the Blessed Organization. That much is obvious. And on that note, we really still don't know who the main enemy of this game is. We know that Dylan has to go around defeating these resonants and trying to solve the event that's been changing Manhattan, but we don't really know what's caused it yet based on these trailers, and that's very interesting. Now, in this new trailer, we do get some footage of what looks to be one of the bosses from the first trailer shooting a giant laser across NYC. Now, we don't know if this happens during the opening, the end, whatever in this game, but we can see in the background it's leading to like this red hiss-like thing in the sky. So I'm kind of wondering, maybe this is what broke the FBC open. Maybe this is what lifted the lockdown, was a giant attack from the outside by maybe Bless, maybe somebody else, or maybe just a new kind of altered entity in the first place, just attacking the FBC. On the other hand, it may be that the hiss was breaking out and this was trying to combat that given that red area in the sky, but really we don't have enough information to go off at this time. So really, Chester Bless, the Blessed Organization, it's a big will it appear, will it not appear at this point. I think a lot of the evidence says yes, but it's still up in the air at this point. So that's a big thing they can pull from in this game. On the other hand, we have the main enemy of the previous game, of course, the hiss. Now, I know too many of you didn't play FBC Firebreak, which I kind of get. It wasn't really the main audience that was playing the games in the first place, but I did enjoy it when I played it a little bit. And one of the big things, because there were lore implications in that game leading into Control Resonant, was that the hiss is kind of evolving. Now, as we know from certain documents of the first game, Alan did kind of write the hiss incantation. Now, there's a little bit of like, did Alan create the hiss? And I think from the information we got from Alan Wake 2, the answer is no. I think he gave it form, but I don't think he created it because I think that's outside of his abilities as established in Alan Wake 2. However, we do now know that the hiss incantation is slightly changing in FBC Firebreak. The language, well, they're getting the same point, quote unquote, across in each sentence. The language is kind of getting more complex and it's, in essence, evolving. And I'm really wondering where the heck this is going to go. Because the hiss in the original seemed to be just kind of this basic organism that just wanted to spread, like it was a basic instinct. And Dylan in the new trailer kind of referred to it as like, oh, it was a way out for him, like giving into that. And even in the original, we kind of see it's just his simple minded goal. And this is probably in reference to his own depression, trying to get away from the reality that was forced upon him. And I think that'll be very interesting to look at in this new trailer for Dylan, but also with the hiss evolving, like, what is that going to turn into? I'm wondering if it even could evolve to the point of consciousness that Polaris has, because we know Polaris could communicate. Whereas the hiss was just a basic structure that was just replicating itself. And if that's the case, if it becomes sentient, quote unquote, more so than it already was, what would its goal be? Would it change beyond just replicating? Would it have a mind of its own and a goal of its own? Of course, we can't really know until the game comes out, so let's move on to some returning characters. Now, thankfully, at the end of this trailer, we do get the confirmation that Dr. Darling will once again feature in recordings like he did in the first game, where, you'd go into an area, you'd see Dr. Darling on the wall in a pre recorded message. But what about other than that? The last time we saw him was in Alan Wake 2 teaming up with Tom Zane to escape the Dark Place, which he somehow ended up after Control. And we know Polaris sent him there, which is the interesting thing, because Polaris sent him, quote unquote, one final lesson, and it sent him to the Dark Place where he was learning more about it, and then he teams up with Tom Zane. Now, I don't know if Polaris wanted him to meet Tom, or if that's just more Tom weirdness, but I do expect that we will see Dr. Darling more than just these pre-recorded messages, but I'm not quite sure about Zane, and I'm not quite sure how much of Darling we will see, given now that he's a big kind of like connection point between these two franchises. Other than that, we now have confirmation that Emily and Arish are now back. Arish seems to be taking on a kind of antagonistic role to Dylan. This is probably due to the incident in the past where Dylan lost control and a lot of FBC agents died. That led to Dylan, of course, being locked up in the Panopticon. And we don't know too much other than that, but I expect that Arish will probably, oh, I knew somebody you killed, and that's like going to be a big thing here. Meanwhile, Emily's being more logical, which is, of course, akin to her character in the first game, where she's very focused on like the scientific fact and getting really lost in that world. But she's very clearly able to see the big picture. The one thing I do want to look at is this image of Emily, and I wasn't quite sure what the heck this blue thing on her neck is in the trailer. When I first saw this, I went, oh my god, she's infected with the mold, but I'm not quite sure if that's still the case. It could be some kind of technology, it could be some new FBC thing, but I think that's just a little food for thought now because we really only have this one image of her. Speaking of returning characters, we should talk about the family adores Antim. Now, Warlandor was a very interesting point for Control Resonant because the first time we ever really heard his name spoken was from the possessed Dylan. Now, I'm personally on the team of Door probably isn't evil until he does something actually evil. And, not letting the hiss invade the multiverse is pretty non evil, I would say. Now, my own personal headcanon for how Door could appear in this game would be a little bit similar to how he appeared in Alan Wake 2, playing a role. I would love, this is just my personal headcanon, but I'd love to see him as some kind of like therapist or something for Dylan. Because I feel like if we're going the route of he's not a bad person, but he's got his goal before anything, and his goal in Quantum Break with that echo of that character of Martin Hatch was very much I'm here for my people and creating the best world for them. Everything else be damned. And I feel like Dylan would be one of his people. So I feel like him getting Dylan in a better place would be in his character, as it kind of was for Alan too. Because even in Alan Wake 2, he was antagonistic to Alan at points, but he was never not on his side. So I'd love to see just an armchair scene of Door talking to Dylan because I feel like that would be just a fun scene. And two, I feel like that could really get into the minds of both these characters, especially because we don't know enough about both of them at this point. Now, I'm not expecting Saga to show up in this game, but Estevez might be in the base game or a DLC. Given her status about like the outside worlds FBC and her connection to Dylan with the Lake House DLC, it's possible we could see her, but I feel like she could be a figurehead for, hey, the lockdown happened, but everybody else out there who was FBC was trying to deal with the outside world and they were the inside world. Of course, if we see Door, we might also see Tim in some fashion, which is going to be incredibly important given his relationship to Jesse, even though they haven't actually met in this universe yet. I even wonder even if the fact that they haven't met might be related to Door choosing this universe as Tim as like his chosen disciple. As we hear like the unwilling disciple, as if he's kind of pulling him from that fate with Jesse, with Beth, and all that stuff. Of course, that goes into Jesse because we don't know really the role Jesse will have in this game. She appeared a bit more in this trailer, so we know she's going to have a starring role, quote unquote, but it is going to be we are looking for her for a majority of this game. So if we do get Tim and we do get Jesse, how the heck are they going to deal with these two characters in the same game? Because of the shared wibbly wobbly, timey wimey history they have going back to Quantum Break. I'm even wondering if we'll get the I'll come back for you line in some form or another, but mainly that's just because I love Quantum Break. On another note, what the hell ever happened to Vanguard? And I'm not talking about the Call of Duty game, but actually, Vanguard was the code name for the other co op game Remedy had in development, but it was canceled before Firebreak ever came out. Now, if you may remember in the doors in the Ocean View Motel or Hotel, if it's an Alan Wake 2, the file names for the symbols, one of them was just Vanguard. That was the two overlapping circles with the little dot in the middle. And in Control, there were some documents like the Keystone inspection that referred to that symbol and events of like, hey, there was an AWE here, but something happened and it seems to be over. So I'm wondering, will that be incorporated into this game's storyline or will it be for a future one? So either way, that's just an interesting thing they can pull from, especially given we don't know too much about what Vanguard was supposed to be. And given things we don't know, I'm wondering, I was asked this question recently by a friend who was trying to like look at Remedy. He's like, what do we think the end game right now looking at this franchise is for just the Remedy connected universe? So to put this in like MCU terms, because it's the RCU, what's the end goal of this phase one? And I think we're either there with Control Resonant or very close to it. Or we're rapidly approaching in a sense, because this is in essence our Battle for Manhattan from the Avengers. This is our Manhattan incident, like a Shinjuku incident kind of thing, where suddenly we can't hide this from the world anymore. Everybody knows about the paranatural. And this is going to shift the entire point of the FBC being in the shadows. That's going to be completely irrelevant with this happening in both in Manhattan and in the modern age. That's going to put a major twist on anything that happens from this point on. I even wonder if that's going to tie into like the fracturing of the FBC following the lockdown that we've seen in the Lake House DLC, and even possibly create more factions. One may even be like tied to the Tennyson report that we know was written by Langston, of just kind of like, what if there was a faction that broke off from the FBC because of this, but they're all like, no, this is magic. This is magic, and we wanted like devote ourselves to this. This could even tie back into Dora and Alan with their dual roles as the master of many worlds. With them, they could be points of like people of interest for these groups, like trying to get them on their sides. I think that could be really interesting. But of course, this is all just headcanon at this point. What we do know is that the events of this game will change the RCU forever, and the repercussions are still like, we don't know exactly what they're going to be. It's been 3 years since the last Bright Falls AWE and the return of Alan Wake, and the outside factions of the FBC are now coming back into the fold with this game. We know this because of the inclusion of this new character, Zoe, who we know is going to be a big character for Dylan's storyline, but she wasn't in the oldest house during the events of the first Control. So she doesn't know really anything of what happened in there. So that's going to be very interesting for, like we have the people in the know and out of the know in both scenarios. The way I see it, there could be a really core group of a few major factions coming out of this game. We have the Jesse Dillon FBC with Emily and the rest from Control 1. We have the other FBCs that split off due to lockdown. We could even maybe have Estevez there, but unclear. Then we have the Blessed Organization and the whole black market stuff. Kind of like the little evil FBCs kind of sort of thing, but we don't really have that pinned down quite yet. We have Ati and Dor. We don't really know what their alliance is. It kind of feels like they are on everybody's side and no one's side at the same time, and that's really fascinating to me. Then we have wherever the team from Alan Wake 2 ends up. That's Alan, Saga, Estevez, and Casey. And then we have the Dark Place trio of Zane, Dr. Darling, and Alice. We know Darling and Zane are working together, but we really don't know what Alice is doing. I had a theory during the time of Alan Wake 2 where it's like Alice could be the one behind the camera during the Zane films, but we really don't know enough. The only way we will know for sure is in September when Control Resonant finally comes out. So please remember to support that game. And if you like this video, then please support me as well. I'm trying to make one video, at least one video a month, with the goal at maybe 2 per month. So please feel free to stick around for whatever videos my hyperfixations lead me to make. But for now, I hope you all have a good one, and yeah, and hope you enjoyed.